TV. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is Alex Ruff, who is the MP for Bruce-Grey-Owensound. And Alex, from the way you're dressed and where you are, you're not in Ottawa, nor are you in your constituency office.
No, I'm in my house here in Tara at the farm, so I just came from the Tara Fall Fair. So yeah, I just thought, you know what, we're on television here, but I don't need to put on a jacket and tie. I think we're okay. We're in Bruce-Grey-Owensound.
We are. You'll notice I don't wear a tie on this show, but yeah, you're right. We can cut you some slack because starting next Monday, you're back to work.
Well, actually Sunday. So yeah, Saturday I got to drive back to Ottawa. My party, we're doing our national caucus meeting on Sunday for one day in Ottawa. I know that the Liberal caucus is out in Nanaimo this week for I think 4 or 5 days, and the NDP are meeting in the Montreal area, I believe. So we chose to go a more economical route that's not going to cost the taxpayer any money.
After all, you're all in Ottawa anyway for the opening of the House.
House starts Monday morning.
Yeah, bright and early.
Not bright and early. Mondays are 11 o'clock start, and most of us won't be there in the House unless you're on House duty until question period at 2, but there's meetings already booked, and it doesn't take long. The fall is always an interesting time when Parliament returns. A lot of stakeholders, advocacy groups arrange Parliament or Days on the Hill, as they call it, and they all show up from across the country in different sectors to advocate for whatever the issues are, and whether it's farmers, whether it's rail lines, whether it's whatever, to advocate. It always seems to book in the first sort of month back, and normally the last week of Parliament as well. So it's going to be all sorts of events going on when we get back to Ottawa.
Well, after all, Ottawa in the spring and fall is lovely. In the summer, it's brutal. I've been in Ottawa enough in the summer. It's one of the worst, next to Washington. It's one of the worst weather cities in the summer. But yeah,
I don't miss not having to be in Ottawa at all. It's great to be home all summer.
Well, you said you were at the Ayr and Tara Fair, and then the fairs are part of summer, fall here in Grey Bruce. Have you've made the round to the various fairs so far?
Yeah, the last week and a half or 2 weeks now. I think the first one was Markdale, and was fascinating with Markdale and a number of our communities. They predate their fall fairs. A lot of the cases are predate Confederation. And we have so many of our villages that actually were incorporated even before Confederation, before Canada became a country, but a lot of our fairs do too, and some of them are pretty close anyway. There's very few fairs that aren't over 150 years ongoing or so. So it's fascinating to see the unique heritage that exists in each of the small communities. Now, they all do different things to help raise money for their ag societies, because, again, none of these fall fairs couldn't be done without the incredible volunteer work by the directors of these ag societies, the volunteers, the community coming together. And so it's great to see. I've attended most of the ambassador competitions, too, in those fall fairs, which is fascinating to see the young people, showing sort of the first steps into leadership and public speaking. Although we were blown away by the incredible abilities of some of them, like Markdale, I think the ambassador down there, she had been involved. MPP Byers had known her from last year. She was involved in the model parliament as one of the representatives from our area. She gave a 5-minute speech, all from memory, that would rock your socks. I'm like, look, and I don't know. Hopefully she doesn't run against one of us in the coming years, because she's got her stuff wired tight. But it's just impressive to see the youth getting involved in the communities. They are the leaders of the future for our area and for the country. So it's great to see that opportunity that our ag societies and these unique competitions that still exist across our region and in all the small towns. So it's been great to do that. Great to support them. Some of them raise money they auction off the prize winning goods. So I was successfully picked up at the Chesley Fall Fair a loaf of bread, winning whole wheat loaf of bread. That only cost me $40, and 6 cinnamon rolls for $80. And then over at Paisley, I picked up a prize-winning banana cake for $270. So I had to bow out at some of the pies that were going for over $500 during the auction bidding. But the other thing I have to be careful of, it seems to, if the auctioneer knows you're the member of parliament, or people in the audience know you're a member, I've been at a couple auctions now, then I somehow get the bids run up against me. So it's anyway, it's a great way to provide some local support to our local ag society. So the fall fairs are in full swing. This weekend there's still a number going on, and then we're pretty much done, I think.
Well, they've got your number. They've really got your number, and let's face it, it all goes to a good cause. So, you know, but I wanted to just touch back on your comment about the ag societies and 4-H being where leadership is developed. One of the things that I learned fairly early on is that in those ag societies and 4-H, this is where they learn young people learn public speaking skills, not just farming skills, because a 4-H project is a major. They learn responsibility, they learn animal care, all kinds of things, but they also learn those really important skills of how to get along with people and in community. And like you're the ambassador contest, public speaking, which is a lost art. So good to see.
No, it is. It's great to see the leadership opportunities and the development opportunities for our youth, and when you're involved, whether it's 4-H, you're doing this stuff and prepping for that. It keeps kids out of trouble, gets them out doing stuff active. It's good for not only the mental health but the physical health too. So and it's just great for that sense of community and giving back. It really develops that sense of understanding how, as these small communities, it's really a sense of family.
Now, you mentioned our MPP, Rick Byers, who has just announced that he's not going to run again in the next provincial election. You don't have any role with that with the provincial body at all, do you?
No, there's no connection between the Federal Conservative Party of Canada and the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. I don't even know. I believe I have a membership with the provincial party, just so it allows me to vote when this nomination race that'll now come up for to nominate somebody for MPP Byers' replacement whenever the next provincial election goes. But I think that's not for another year and a half, 2 years. I think it's slated for June of 2026. So I do, want to thank Rick for publicly. I think he's done a terrific job in his couple years. He's not going anywhere. He's still going to be our MPP for a while. But yeah, I wish that the provincial membership of locally to pick another great candidate to run for the Ontario PC party here for Bruce-Grey-Owensound. But yeah, me other than if my membership's current and I get to cast a ballot, there's no, I have zero involvement, as the MP or as the Conservative Party of Canada. Has no connection with the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm. Just we got to keep these lines of accountability clear. It's very, very critical. Some people cross them and get them all mixed up, but good to keep the records straight. Now, one of the things that was going on in the fall and will be also picking up again was going on in the spring and will be picking up again in the fall is the government foreign interference in our election process hearings, which this relates to your private member's bill about what is referred to as need to know. And where is that bill's? What I think it passed second reading in June. Where is it now?
So let's before we get into the PMB, let's talk about just the foreign interference and sort of. Mm-hmm. There really is no connection other than it would make it easier if my bill passes to have more MPs that would have a secret security clearance, which then would make it easier that if they are being targeted by foreign interference, for CSIS to then brief them to a higher level with more details and specificity. But yeah, the public inquiry, I know when it comes to having the former Justice Hogue to dig into sort of the whole allegations then tied to the parliamentarians that either were wittingly or unwittingly engaged in foreign interference or implicated. That's part of what she's going to look into and is part of the public inquiry standpoint. With my PMB, yeah, it's gone off to committee. It's going to gone off to the Procedural and House Affairs Committee. That could happen sooner or later. That committee, is a bit more flexible. They don't do a whole lot of your traditional studies that the Standing Committee on Agriculture or Heritage or Defense or Veterans Affairs deal with. It deals more with the procedural stuff, so stuff can happen very quickly at that committee. New stuff can spin up, but I expect that within the first month or so back, I'll have to go to that committee and testify. I will continue to personally engage with the Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, because I was a little bit surprised at the second reading vote that the government actually voted against it. Because I really don't understand why they would. I did get 3 Liberal MPs that did vote in support of it, and 2 of them are parliamentary secretaries within the government. So they get it. I don't understand why the rest of the government didn't get it. And I've talked to the security establishment, like CSIS folks. I've talked to PCO. So I don't understand where the sort of discrepancy or concerns are with the bill, because my bill doesn't do anything other than allow parliamentarians, i.e. MPs or senators, to apply to get a secret security clearance. Doesn't mean they're going to pass. And just because you have a security clearance, should they pass and be granted one, it doesn't automatically grant them access to any information, right? That's the next sort of step in the process. So my bill is very simple, and I'm maybe optimistic, but we'll see what happens once it comes back from committee. Maybe we will get unanimous support at report stage and third reading. So I'm optimistic.
Well, certainly we'll be back on that subject again when you're back on, because my connection with the inquiry, Justice Hoag's inquiry, is simply based, as you said, on the briefing, and this is an issue. It appears to be something that is occurring globally. Interference in elections in a variety of ways. And I mean, I'll be honest, I consider my vote one of the highest privileges I have as a Canadian citizen. And anyone who interferes with that is certainly not in my good books.
Look, I don't blame you. I agree wholeheartedly. I've spent a lot of my time in countries where people don't have the privilege of voting for in democratic elections, so it's something that I take very serious, and it's sad when you have a foreign state trying to interfere in what we have and who gets elected here in Canada. So we need to protect that with the highest priority and utilize all the capabilities and needed to make sure we protect that vital part of our democracy.
Well, it's certainly something that will be, I'm sure, on the agenda this fall as Justice Hoag continues her work, and we'll be hearing more of those hearings. And do you recall the timing of her final report? Is it? I can't see it being more than until next spring, perhaps.
I'm not sure. I'd have to dig it up there, David. I'm not sure off the top of my head. It's fairly tight, though. It's fairly tight, but I think there was a bit of an extension tied to the fact that this Parliament referred her to look into these additional sort of requirements, so that may delay things. And again, it's not like, I think she has a lot of flexibility, but there's a recognition ideally it gets done before the next federal election, which of course could happen sooner than later. Some of us want it to happen sooner than later for sure, but we'll see what happens.
And speaking of elections sooner rather than later, we got a bit of a shock around just recently when Mr. Singh decided to pull the pin on the supplying confidence motion that the NDP had with the Liberals, and said, "Neat, we're gone." But okay, so we're back into a minority government situation, I guess.
Yeah, look, I mean, I was a little bit surprised to see it happening, but at the same time, I wasn't shocked by any means. To me, I don't know if it'll fundamentally change anything. It's more a comms exercise for the NDP. They've recognized that we're a year out at max sort of deal from the next election. It could go a lot sooner. They have not got, from a political or partisan standpoint, really any benefit from getting tied at the hip to the governing Liberal Party. And so, therefore, this was something that the NDP were going to have to do sooner than later anyway, likely, in order to try to increase their possibility of doing better in the next federal election. So I think part of it's all for political partisan purposes. It's really not. It's a lot of comms messaging, and I don't know if it's fundamentally going to change anything. The proof will be in the pudding, as they say, when we come to the next confidence vote, whether that's an actual opposition day motion that gets moved, or whether it's when we start voting on the fall economic statement that will come out in November. There's normally not a lot of confidence votes in the fall. There's normally at least a few every month, but it's and to remind viewers out there, anything to do with money is a confidence vote. So the fall economic statement, when the estimates get voted on, and when the budget gets voted on, those are all confidence votes. And so if those don't pass, because that's the government, that's the one thing that Parliament controls, that the government doesn't have unilateral sort of authority, is the spending of money. They have to have permission from Parliament to get the money writ large in sort of the pots that it gets allocated in. Now they can move it around sort of internally, and they can, they don't brief us on absolutely every penny that they're spending on every initiative. We don't get to debate everything. And again, it's tough with the budget. A lot of it is in the budget, but when the budget's 550 some pages or so long, very difficult in the few short days of debate to parse apart all that information and then understand fully what it means on every situation of allocation money. So anyway, to get back to your point, proof will be in the pudding come next confidence vote, whether or not the NDP are serious, that they're tired of, to quote, I think, Mr. Singh's words, the weak and corrupt, Liberal government, because that's sort of what he was saying, that they're not up to doing the job. So if they're not up to doing the job, then let's have an election and allow the people to choose a party and a government that they feel are up to the job.
It's interesting because the Bloc comes into play as well, because they may choose to support the Liberals, and that kind of changes all it does is change the result of the vote, but not necessarily. But if the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives decide to vote against the government, it's, hey, hello, we got an election. But one of the things that that your comment triggered in me is, I don't recall very many winter elections in my lifetime. This country doesn't, having an election in the winter is not the easiest thing in this country. So more likely, there was a more likely possibility of things rolling in the spring or the summer or the fall.
Yeah, I think you're right, David. I can't comment. Despite your viewers may be shocked to know, you are 1 or 2 years older than me, so you've been at 1 or 2 elections longer. In the end, I can't remember a winter federal election either, anytime in my voting sort of time frame that I can remember. So, yeah, I think, and again, it's tied to those key things. And again, common sense needs to somewhat prevail when it comes to the logistics around these things. But who knows, right? My prediction is next spring. I think if the NDP are going to walk away from it, it would make sense to do it next spring. And to be frank, I'd rather see it go, it'd be nice to go next spring. Again, I'd love to have an election be called tomorrow, but ultimately I don't see it happening until likely next spring at the earliest. But who knows? Politics are a fickle thing. I don't know. I'm still new to it, even though it's almost been 5 years. It is, you never know what, like you asked us when we went back last fall, and I imagine we did the show then too, and I guarantee you we did not predict the 2 or 3 things that were going to make the headlines and preoccupy us in the House of Commons for really the better part of a month when we got back last year. So who knows what's going to come out of the woodwork here in the next less than a week before we get back, or in the first couple weeks back here in late September.
Well, I have to say that the one thing about politics is it's not predictable. Never. And I was just,
It's one of the enjoyable things too of it because you're not bored.
oh, for sure. I was just thinking, and I was racking my brain, when was the last winter federal election? And I'm going to say possibly the 1960s. It's been that long. Yeah, you probably weren't even a twinkle in your father's eye, as they say. But
I was
I'm
born in
guessing.
74, David. I was born in
All right.
74.
Well, let's make it even more dramatic. It would have been before the Leafs won the Stanley Cup
Yeah. Long time ago.
a long time ago. So I'm thinking, I
Yeah.
could be quite wrong, but and that's off the top of my head. I just know that the weather is definitely not conducive to elections in this country, although it certainly could be done.
Yep.
It certainly could be done. I'm sure, and I'm quite sure that Elections Canada and dare I say Elections Ontario are ready to go when they need to go. And I will say that we've had occasional conversations already here at Rogers about, well, how are we going to cover this? Actually, that raises another interesting question, a technical question. There are two there are at least two by-elections, the one in Toronto St. Paul's and the one right now in LaSalle, where the ballot in the first case it was 84 candidates, and the second it's nearly 100 candidates. And there is this movement basically to get the government's attention or Elections Canada's attention to change the voting system. Do you think there's 100 people in Grey Bruce who'd want your job?
There may very well be. I'm not sure, David. Last election, I think there were six of us. I think both elections, there's been six of us on the
Yes.
ballot.
Yeah.
Um, I was a little last election because again it was a snap election. It was we were none of us were predicting it because obviously we had just voted on it in June of 2021 that they passed unanimously that we wouldn't have an election till the pandemic was over, and then Mr. Trudeau changed his mind and called the election. So a lot of people weren't prepared. A lot of the parties weren't. So I think we were almost after he called it. We were a week. It was a week or two before I even knew if anybody was going to run against me. So ultimately, this time when the next election occurs, I'm sure we will have. I don't know if we'll have 100 people because the organization behind the groups that you're mentioning that are sort of the behind these by-elections sort of massive number of candidates, which was funny enough with the Toronto St. Paul's one. I think there was even one candidate failed to get a single vote. So I don't, I don't know how that individual didn't vote for themselves. But in the end, that does take a lot of work for these people that are very passionate about trying to change the voting system. So their ability to do that in a federal election on a national scale, I don't think is realistic. Although interesting enough, there was a big push I know in the last municipal election in Grey Highlands. I think Grey Highlands had a record 17 or so candidates on the ballot. So it takes somebody to get behind it and organize it and really try to encourage more. Now that wasn't because they were against the system at the municipal level. They were just trying to encourage greater civic engagement at the municipal level and higher voter turnout. So, we'll see what happens though federally. But yeah, it'll be those two by-elections are Monday night. It'll be fascinating to see the results. I know we're realistically, I think it's more of a three-way race in the Montreal riding between the NDP, the Liberals, and the Bloc. I don't think we're as competitive. I think, from my understanding, we have a really phenomenal candidate. But what will interest me is if it's a three-way race, it doesn't take a whole lot to make it a four-way race. And so that'll be a fascinating by-election. And the one out in Edmonton is one that it's the first time in a long time. I mean, we did hold the seat from
Winnipeg?
2011 to 2015.
Is it not Winnipeg?
Yeah, it's in the Winnipeg area.
Yeah, Winnipeg. It's because it's Dan Blakey's.
Daniel Blakey, and it was his father for years before. As I said, I think there was John Tull or I'm not sure of the name, but somebody was talking to me about this the other day. We held it during the Conservatives held it during the Harper majority government from 11 to 15, but ultimately, we're working hard. I know my colleagues out west are working hard to support our candidate there, and hopefully do another sort of take that seat from the NDP, because it's the first time a non-Blakey has been running in that riding in a long time. So they've held it between Dan, who's now working at the municipal level for the Manitoba Premier. But Daniel, fascinating MP. Really, I got nothing bad to say him personally. Don't agree on a lot of stuff politically, but a really well-spoken, smart MP that could hold his own and he could get a pretty good dig in too during debates and during questions, and understood the subtle art of getting a dig in without doing it over the top sometimes. But in the end, it's a riding. I'm optimistic that maybe we can flip and turn it blue here on Monday. We'll see. So there'll be lots of people watching their televisions Monday night up in Ottawa.
Well, I'm. You referred to my age a few minutes ago. I knew his father. That's scary stuff.
Yeah.
That's just. I did know Bill Blakey, but yeah, not well, but certainly enough to say hello and to know him professionally. Very, very interesting, and in that long tradition of labor politics that came out of Winnipeg, actually in the Depression, but no, before the Depression. But that's a whole part of political history that I won't go into. There's enough stuff going on. Anyway, we're coming up on break in a minute, but I just want to talk to you about that energy rebate scam that you publicized over the summer. What's that about?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything big, but it was an opportunity I felt worthwhile, because we had a couple of callers call into my office or email the office saying that they had received phone calls from a company promising energy rebates that were calling on the behalf of MP Alex Ruff's office. And so I don't know if they thought that would convince people it was legit or not. And that's why it was important for me to quickly get a public statement out. It wasn't over the top, but we didn't get a whole lot of feedback or complaints, but we did get a couple callers. So I wanted to put a pin in it as quickly as possible to get it out there to the population. And again, it was a reminder to all constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owensound to pay attention. I mean, I don't know about you, David. I still get inundated almost daily. I even had one, the phone rang. I didn't answer it today during the Aaron Terra parade. I was in a vehicle there with the mayor and council of Aaron Elderslie. But I normally do take the calls, because if I can preoccupy these people, if I have enough time and keep them on the line for even if it's a minute or two, it means they're not targeting somebody else that may unfortunately not realize it's a scam call. So there's a few tricks I use all the time. When they call you and they're holding up your suspicious package at the border, or Amazon notice something on your whatever, I always call them and say I say yes, to get an actual person on the phone, and then I immediately tell them, yeah, no, I ordered that. Why are you holding it up? And they never know what to say, and then they just normally hang up on me, because there's nothing to debate or discuss. I don't need to give them any information. I just tell them, yeah, I absolutely ordered that, and then it goes away, because obviously they're just trying to get your information. I've been getting a lot from supposedly Bell Canada trying to give me a new phone. And normally they're calling my work phone, so I talk to them for a little, I put them on a speakerphone, keep working for a while, just say yes every few minutes. And then when they say, well, can we sign you up, or do you want a new phone? I say, absolutely, but this is my work phone. You got to talk to my boss. So, and do you want his number? And then they normally hang up, because no, they don't want to call somebody else. So it's, people got to be suspicious about all the different telemarketers that they're getting, and they should never be asking for your personal information. So long story to just say, yeah, we got a few of these around an energy rebate scam, and it was important that I get that message out that this was in no way anything associated with my office, and that it was a scam.
Well, I'm glad you raised the telephone fraud thing. I am quite familiar with that particular fraud because it's around, and we keep getting these phone calls, but the watchword is don't give out your personal information. Don't give your credit card number. If they're from Bell, they're not. If you talk to any of the phone companies, they don't, that's not how they market. You're not going to get a free phone or a cheap phone. No. So just don't. Just, as you say, hang up if you've got better things to do. Just tell them to go away. And for gosh sakes, never, ever give out your credit card information, social insurance number, personal banking information, or any personal information. Just don't. Smart. And just hang up. At that point, we've got to take a break, and we'll be right back. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and just hold on.
This is Rogers TV.
My Uncle Cheney was one of over 150,000 Indigenous children that were taken to residential schools between the 1800s and 1996. My uncle ran away from school wanting to get home to his mom and dad, and sadly he didn't make it and died of exposure. When Gord Downey found out about my late Uncle Cheney's story, he wrote Secret Path, a series of poems that became an album, then a graphic novel, a documentary, and a concert. Gord met my family, and together we formed the Gord Downey and Cheney Winjack Fund. Together we are sharing Secret Path and other reconciliation resources with legacy schools, setting up legacy spaces across Canada, and hosting events like Secret Path Week to inspire all Canadians to engage in reconciliation. Before he left us, Gord asked us all to do something.
You're gonna figure it out.
Will you join us? Together we can make Canada a better place.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. Now, I have a confession to make and an apology. While we were on break, Alex Ruff did some quick research on his computer, and he tells me the last winter election in Canada was 2006. And of course, that was the victory of Stephen Harper. So trust a conservative to give me the right answer.
Hey, I was wrong too. I didn't think it was in my lifetime, but I was alive in 2006, David.
But where were you in 2006?
I was prepping to go to Afghanistan. I'd actually been over there once, January of 06. I wasn't. I was still at the infantry school. I hadn't been promoted major yet, so I was working as the operations officer at the infantry school. So full-time sort of job there, running the school, putting all the Army officers basically through that, and non-commissioned officers. So as the operations officer, yeah, it was a full-time job. I worked long hours at that job.
And as I recall, the operational tempo for the Canadian Forces was very high in that particular period.
Very high, and as I said, I knew I was being promoted and going in. You know, I had to do the combat team commander's course and get promoted and gear up for Afghanistan. So it was, it was pretty interesting times for sure.
But did you vote?
I've never missed a vote that I can think of federally in my life, and I don't think I've missed a provincial vote, and or even a municipal vote. And for listeners out there, because sometimes they don't understand this. Municipally, you're allowed to vote wherever you own property. So I've owned property here in, just off the home farm for 20 some years. So I've always been able to vote in Aaron Elderslie. Provincially, in the military, you had to vote wherever you resided. But federally, one of the benefits of the Canadian Armed Forces is you can, if you didn't change it, you can stay voting in your home riding where you enrolled in the military from. So I've actually never voted anywhere federally since I turned 18, other than the riding of Bruce-Grey-Owensound.
Well, that's great. That's great. And I'm sure the last couple of elections you voted for yourself.
Yeah, I have, and I've even voted for, in those elections from overseas. I've had to vote from either Bosnia. I'd have to go back and check the exact dates. I think I voted from Afghanistan on one of my tours too. So it's a special ballot that's got to get mailed in well in advance. But it's something I've always taken serious.
That's great. That's great. It's good to hear that our service personnel can have that option to do, so that they don't lose, dare I say it, what they're fighting for.
100%. It's something we take very seriously. We need to afford, when you're fighting for democracy and freedom, you better not take it away from those that are fighting
Right.
for it.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to something that is not public yet, but I think is an important issue, and that's what you referred to me as your statement about the Amish, and has to do with HST. What's all that about?
Yeah, so, GST remittance at the federal level. So in the 2023 budget, the Liberal government passed policy or legislation that requires everybody to file their GST remits electronically. They must, or they get fined. The fine's $100 the first time you fail to submit it electronically, and after that, it's $250 every quarter of a fine. Well, I even asked a question this past spring, written question, an OPQ as we call it, order paper question, to the government saying, whoa, how many people are this, I'd have to pull it up, are implicated by this? How many people, what's the exemption process? What are you doing? Well, people like the Amish and the Old Order Mennonites that don't have technology at all, don't have cell phones, don't use the internet, don't have television. What are the options? Can they get exemption? And basically they're written, oh yeah, they can apply for an exemption. They didn't provide me in my response or publicly what that exemption process is. It is buried on their website somewhere. They didn't mail letters out to all of these Amish people or seniors or people that had traditionally filed by paperwork their remittance on time. They're doing everything by the book. And now I've already got Amish people coming into my office. I've got actually, they're seniors. I guess some of them may be seniors still running their own business, or just people that have been filing religiously on time all their GST returns by paper, and they're now getting hit with $100 fines here initially and $250, and they're quite upset about it, because why are we forcing Canadians, law-abiding Canadians, to switch over to something digitally when they're not comfortable with the technology for whatever reason, or they don't have access? In the Amish cases, it's ridiculous. They know these people have been filing like they should have provided, and a warning. And funny enough, there's one business in the area. They filed by paper. They'd run out of the form, the GST remittance form for paper, so they'd written the CRA, who mailed them the form, the paper form, to file their stuff, and there's nothing in saying you got to file electronically. And then when they refilled out the paperwork CRA sent them in paper copy, when they got their return back, they had $100 fine on it with interest on the $100 already that they own. Oh, so this is something I've talked to some of my colleagues about. We're quite upset about it. It's something that I will be bringing to the government's attention yet again via direct interaction with the minister and the government. But it's something I'm almost tempted to draft another private member's bill. And in fact, for the viewers out there, it's my latest monthly question on my website. If you go to alexruffmp.ca, you can actually check out my monthly question. I'm asking constituents whether they would support making it mandatory that any federal government department, agency, or service must allow Canadians to file by paper without a penalty or a fine. It's great that they want to make things more efficient for the bureaucracy, and if somebody can file electronically, that's a great option. It's not like, why are you penalizing Canadians that choose to use paper? So it's something I'm a big believer. You can't be forcing people to go down a certain route with a federal government or service, especially when they don't have access, and trying to ask for an exemption that you're not even warning them, you're burying it on their website. That doesn't make sense. Like, if they don't use internet or they don't have it, how do they find out what the process is to even ask for that exemption?
It kind of flies in the face of anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, where basically, if you're not of the larger class, you don't qualify. And not only that, we're going to penalize you financially for doing something we always allowed you to do. It just doesn't make sense. One wonders where the head of the certain civil servants were on that day. I don't know.
Doesn't pass the common sense test, David.
It does not. But I think the other thing too is, and I realized when you told me about this before the show, is that this particular decision has an impact not just on groups like the Amish, but there are an awful lot of nonprofits who qualify for the GST rebate, and they file religiously every 6 months, and it's often not an inconsiderable revenue stream. You know, it can be a few $100 to a few $1,000s. I've seen some recently where a construction project was being done, and it was not inconsiderable, and everything was just done. And well, we shall see. We'll follow up with that one when we come back with our next show. When you're on next, the answers will be interesting to say the least. Well, let's move on to another, dare I say, common sense thing. I understand that the government has started to listen to you regarding decommissioned and surplus armored vehicles.
Yeah, so something that raised its head right off the get-go when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine was they needed all the support possible through equipment. Canada has been upgrading our armored fleet for some time, or like our armored vehicle fleet in the Army. We're now driving the Army around in LAV 6, Light Armored Vehicle 6s, as they're called. We have Bison ambulances that were being decommissioned. Even the first LAV, they're actually sort of technically, you call them like a LAV 2, the Coyote fleet, the reconnaissance vehicles that we were fighting in. We had them in Afghanistan. They've been around a long time. And a lot of our old M113 track vehicles. And so I asked this question of the government, 2 years ago. Over 2 years ago, shortly after the war broke out, and said, what are we going to do with our decommissioned vehicles? We got a whole bunch of vehicles that could be donated to the Ukrainian forces. They were asking, in fact, we had Ukrainian MPs visiting Ottawa, and they were asking for this stuff. And so we stood up. I asked a question in question period, didn't really get a response. I followed up during an adjournment proceedings. I remember that conversation with Adam Van Couverden, who was the Parliamentary Secretary for Health, but the government tends to send one parliamentary secretary to answer 3 questions. And again, if you want some entertainment value, viewers can go watch that on my YouTube channel or on the House of Commons website, my interaction with Mr. Van Couverden that night, because I couldn't help get a dig in after I did my 4-minute speech. He did his 4-minute reply speech because I stated in my opening things to set it up a little bit. I'm looking forward to either the Minister or Parliamentary Secretary of Defense to finally answer when these vehicles could be donated to Ukraine. I'm looking forward to the update and the timeline on when it's going to be done. And then, of course, Adam Van Couverden answer, who was the Parliamentary Secretary for Health at the time. So I immediately, in my 1-minute rebuttal or final sort of minute of debate, I said, well, I want to congratulate the member for Milton on his promotion to become the Parliamentary Secretary of Defense. And even though that isn't what he was. But anyway, good news. Last week, the government announced those labs and coyotes, those bisons and those things are all being donated in the coming weeks, days. I'm not sure when. The timeline hasn't, but they are going to finally donate them to the Ukrainian force. It only took them 2 years to come to that realization, along with a bunch of the CR7 rockets that are from the Air Force that we had brought up in this back, I think, almost last winter, earlier in the spring, when we became aware that we had tens of thousands of them sitting here in Canada that we were no longer putting on our aircraft that the Ukrainian forces wanted. So those are part of that announcement last week from the minister. So sometimes they're a little bit faster. On the rockets, only took them 6 to 8 months to see common sense, but yeah, it took them 2 years on the armored vehicles. But I'm glad to see it finally happen.
Yes, those CRV-7 rockets were used on the CF-5s. If I'm
think
not
you're right.
mistaken. I don't know whether they made it to the Hornets. They may have, but the CF-188 Hornets. But I know they were used on the CF-5s. They're older.
I don't think they were on the Hornet at all.
They're older than my kids. I'm sorry. You spoke of a common sense test. Why do we have them in storage for so long?
And I think part of it, there's a cost to dispose of them. So it even makes more sense that if you have another country that's willing to take them on and in some cases cannibalize them so they can use the workable parts, or they can actually use them because they're flying, compatible platforms, or they're using them on a scale that's what war does, that they need them, then obviously it's just even more common sense. Like, here's a way we can help an ally and at the same time, save the taxpayer money to some extent, or the cost that it is to donate them is worth it for the freedom that Ukraine is trying to fight for in support of their own territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. What do you do with old arms that are no longer useful? You dispose of them, as you said, or decommission them. It costs money. Hate to see them be used in war, but at the same time, like you say, there's a client state that wants them and needs them. Well, let's say, and those particular rockets, I'm quite sure the Ukrainians will find a very inventive use for them.
I'm sure they
seem
will
to be able to turn what is our junk into things that are very effective.
I agree with you.
Well, the funny one is that to me at least is, and this is getting into the weeds a bit, but they have these remote controlled submarines that they have used very effectively in the Black Sea. And the engines that are in them are from snowmobiles. They're not made by Bombardier. They're made by Rotax in Austria. But the same things that we put into snowmobiles. So, hey, you can use it for pleasure or use it for war. It's the way it is sometimes, I guess.
Yep.
Anyway, let's move on a little bit to the coronation medals. And that was something that came out in the spring. And tell us a bit about the coronation medal.
Yeah, so the government did decide to mint a number of, I don't know how many nationwide, I think 30-some thousand of them or something, but they did allocate partner organizations, including all members of parliament, an allocation of 20 to do that. So I made an announcement there at the start of the summer that I would be taking nominations of deserving constituents to recognize them with the King's Coronation Medal. So the cutoff date was September 2nd, so that's over now. And now I got the real tough part of the job is going through the incredibly well-deserving nominations that we've received and narrow it down to the 20. So I'm still banding around exactly how I'm going to do that. I have not looked at any of the nominations yet, but I may have one of my staff members remove all the names from them before I actually even look at them, and I may actually go and seek a couple other people from the community to put together almost like a little mini board, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. But that's something I got to get going on, because ideally I'd like to start handing some of those out my first constituency back around Thanksgiving. It'd be nice to organize an event and do that in October. So that's the goal. We'll see if I get all the logistics sorted out in order to do that and recognize a number of those well-deserving constituents.
Were you pleased with the response?
Yeah, no, it's like anything. Yeah, no, I'd have to bug my staff, to be frank. As I said, I've been keeping it arm's length, so I do see emails popping in, but I'm not. I know we've got way more than 20. I don't know how many we've got. I just remember when I did minted those Queen's Platinum Jubilee coins that I got done up and did 70 of those. We received well over 70 nominations, and that was tough then too. But as for these King's medals, I'm confident that we've got lots of applications that are well deserving. So yeah, but I can't make an informed decision. I haven't bugged my team on exactly what the final number was yet, because as I said, I'm trying to make sure I do it in a way that is where you can't, because after 5 years, I know a lot. You get to know a lot of people in the riding, especially a lot of the people that are engaged publicly in volunteer work and stuff. So you don't want to create any type of bias or perception of bias when we're doing it, even though there's nothing stopping. I mean, that's the privilege of the position I have and the way they've been allocated. But the nominators and the recipients will all be named actually on the Governor General's website. So that was another thing. It wasn't going to be Alex Ruff having nominated 20 constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owensound. It's my name with the 20 recipients. It's going to be whoever did. So I didn't nominate anybody myself. I just have the privilege of narrowing it down and helping with the selection process.
Well, Alex, isn't that why you have staff?
Yeah, but it's not the staff's jobs to balance this out. I'm a big believer in criteria, but that's why I have staff to help, as I said, to take the names off the files that we've received and say, you know what, there's just no name, no gender. I don't need that in the information to determine or part of the determination process. Good.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear the announcements. You really don't have a whole lot of time, because there's we're taping on September 11th, but at the same time, Thanksgiving is a month away.
A month away, yep.
So you better get to work there, guy. Better get to work. I also want to touch on something we have touched on before here on Politically Speaking, and that is the value of income tax clinics. Now, you may think I'm crazy because it's September, and why on earth is he talking about income tax clinics? Well, let me explain my logic here. Recently, there was a presentation made at Owen Sound City Council by the Poverty Task Force, and one of the points they made is that the best way to increase your income, if you fall into certain low-income categories or you're a senior, is, for goodness sakes, file your tax return. And that's all you need to do. It's not complicated, and especially because Alex, when I mentioned you, Alex is a participant and a supporter of the income tax clinics that will be coming up in the late winter, early spring.
Yeah, we have a number of, obviously, clinics right across Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. My office specifically helps with the organizing the ones in Owen Sound, and that we'll take the names and make sure it gets off to the right volunteers that help do this. So it's, I know there's some tweaking going on and ways to try to make it ever more efficient. And again, it's something actually for any of your viewers out there, David, that have the ability to file or to help volunteer to help do them. They're not normally complicated tax returns. Like this is, in fact, that's part of the free volunteer clinics, is that they are simple tax returns, personal tax returns that are being done. But I think they're always looking for more volunteers as well at the different clinics across the riding that can help out or are willing to help that. So it's something that there's lots of information available online, but if people do want to reach out, my office can definitely steer them to the right point of contact if they're interested in volunteering, because you're right. So many seniors and people that are in low-income situations, you can't get the benefit or that rebate at the federal level or even at the provincial level in a lot of cases, unless your tax returns are up to date, because a lot of them are obviously income tested, right? You get your old age, no problem, but you can't get your GIS unless your income tax is up to date, because they need to know your annual income prior, right? And so that stuff gets cut off if you don't have it done. And if you're in a tough situation where you need that monthly income to help pay your rent or your mortgage, all of a sudden, if you don't get it in on time and you lose it for even just a month or two before it gets caught back up, well, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that makes life difficult. So it's something very important that, and it's so appreciated, the volunteers out there that help out with these clinics.
And I have to say, it is free. It's your money. It's not free money. It's your money.
Yeah.
And just to give you the viewers an idea of how much, I did hear some figures last year from the United Way and from the Poverty Task Force that pointed out that in many cases, the money received was $4,000 a year. Just think about that. What would you do with an additional $4,000 if you qualified? Just file your tax return and, as Alex said, call his office. It's a great program. It can make a real difference in people's life. It also applies to child tax credits as well. And any of the government income programs, and we can go on and on and on about them. But at the same time, if you want to qualify, file a tax return.
Absolutely.
And Al, this is one of the, we've talked, Alex, about the service part of being an MP, and that is the work that you do to help people, help your constituents, as opposed to sitting in the House of Commons dealing with legislation. This is the kind of flip side, and this is a very concrete example of how to do it. So kudos to your office, and let's keep this going. Let's just keep this going. We got about 2 minutes left, Alex. What are you looking forward to when Parliament resumes?
Well, before we even get that going, I do want to take the opportunity to give a shout out to all our incredible emergency service people, and in particular our firefighters. I had the opportunity to partake in the 9/11 Memorial Stair Climb organized by the Chatsworth Fire Department and representatives with people from fire departments across the area, police, paramedics, etc., and do 10 laps around the Bayshore Arena, Harry Lumley Arena, up and down the stairs in full firefighting gear. It was, needless to say, it put me in the hurt locker. Wearing a snowmobile suit, which is basically with that firefighting gear, it's incredible. And so it gave me an eye-opening appreciation for just the hard work and the risks that our firefighters put themselves in, but just what they need to do. So kudos to all our firefighters, because the vast majority of them, it isn't full-time work. Most of them are volunteers.
Very true.
So kudos to them. Yeah, when I get back, look, I'm just looking forward to getting back to highlighting some of these issues that we talked about on the show today, right? Let's make sure common sense prevails. Let's make sure all Canadians aren't being penalized just because they don't choose to use digital services or don't have access to the internet. Let's make life more affordable for Canadians. And again, I'll be fascinated to see how the politics play out in it and how soon we can have another federal election, because I'm looking forward to getting out there and doing my best to win over the voters of Bruce-Grey-Owensound and get reelected as the MP for this area.
And with that, Alex, thank you. We got to go, so we'll talk to you again. And friends, I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. Oh yeah, we'll talk again.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm David Shearman, host of Politically Speaking. Join me for my next show, where my guest will be Alex Ruff, MP for Bruce-Grey-Owensound, Politically Speaking on Rogers TV.
I'll always protect you.
She is my sister, and she's missing.
You saved her more than once. I know you'll save her again.
You took part of me.
I have access to everyone you love.
What happens next is on you.
I'm coming for you, and you will pay for all the pain you caused.
I'll be waiting.